December 14th, 2025. 4:17 local time. Gulf of Aden. 6 armed men climb over the stern rail of a cargo vessel. Grappling hooks, aluminum ladders, a K-47s slung across their chests. They think this is a routine hijacking. 13 United States Marines are staged 2 decks below, in full combat gear, watching the pirates' every move on thermal cameras. The pirates don't know it yet, but they've just boarded a trap. I'm your host at Navy Powerline, where we break down real naval operations and the decisions behind them. Today, we're reconstructing a counter-piracy operation that intelligence officials have described as one of the most surgically executed honeypot interdictions in the history of combined maritime forces. Because what happened on that ship in under 4 minutes neutralized 6 gunmen and dismantled a pirate logistics network that had been running undetected for over a year. And it started with a question no one in NavCent could answer. Why were pirates suddenly targeting a very specific type of vessel? To understand why the U.S. Navy set this trap, you need to go back 3 months. September 2025. The waters east of the Horn of Africa were seeing something unusual. Piracy in the Gulf of Aden had never fully stopped. Despite years of international naval patrols, Combined Task Force 151, EU Naval Force Operation Atalanta, independent deployments by China, India, Japan, attacks continued at a low simmer. Between 2019 and 2024, incidents averaged between 10 and 20 per year. Manageable, containable. Then, in August 2025, the numbers spiked. 14 attempted boardings in 6 weeks. That alone would have triggered an intelligence review. But the pattern was what alarmed analysts at the Office of Naval Intelligence in Suitland, Maryland. Every targeted vessel matched the same profile. Mid-size bulk carriers, between 15,000 and 25,000 deadweight tons. Low freeboard, meaning the deck sat close to the waterline, making boarding easier. Minimal visible security. No armed escort. And critically, all of them were transiting a narrow corridor between 12 and 14 degrees north latitude, hugging the Somali coastline closer than most commercial traffic dared. Someone was selecting targets with precision. This wasn't opportunistic piracy. This was coordinated. An intelligence fusion cell at Combined Maritime Forces headquarters in Bahrain began cross-referencing the attack data with AIS transponder logs, satellite imagery, and signals intercepts from the region. The pattern pointed to a single operational cluster, a group of 6 to 8 skiffs operating from a mothership, likely a hijacked dhow, repositioning every 48 to 72 hours along the Puntland coast. The cell identified the probable base of operations, a stretch of the coastline near Ale, a town that had been a piracy hub during the peak years of 2008 to 2012. But what they couldn't identify was the coordinator. Someone was feeding these pirates targeting data, vessel types, transit schedules, security postures. That information wasn't available from a skiff with binoculars. It required access to shipping databases or port intelligence. The fusion cell submitted a classified assessment to 5th Fleet Command in late September 2025. The conclusion: disrupting the skiffs alone wouldn't solve the problem. The network had a brain, and the only way to find it was to let the pirates come to them. The concept was simple, dangerously simple. Put a vessel matching the target profile into the corridor. Make it look vulnerable. Let the pirates board. Then take them, alive, with every phone, GPS device, and scrap of intelligence they carried. The plan was designated Operation Lariat in planning documents. Sources familiar with the operation described it as a honeypot interdiction, a term borrowed from cyber operations, where a deliberately vulnerable system is deployed to attract and study attackers. But translating a cyber concept to open water is a different matter entirely. The vessel selected was a cargo ship. Its name has not been publicly disclosed, operating under a flag of convenience. It had been leased through intermediary companies and modified at a facility in Djibouti over a 3-week period in November 2025. The modifications were invisible from the outside. Internal reinforcements to key compartments, concealed camera positions with thermal and low-light capability covering all exterior approaches, a hardened communications suite linked to the CTF-151 command network via encrypted satellite uplink, and a reconfigured lower deck that could house a 13-man team with full equipment for up to 14 days. That team was a Marine Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team, FAST, drawn from the Marine Corps Security Force Regiment based at Naval Weapons Station, Yorktown, Virginia. FAST platoons are specifically trained for hostile boarding response, embassy reinforcement, and high-value asset protection. They deploy with M4 carbines, shotguns for breaching, flashbang grenades, flex cuffs, and night vision optics. Every member is qualified in close-quarters combat and non-lethal takedown procedures. The team leader was a staff sergeant with 2 prior counter-piracy deployments. According to after-action assessments, he had briefed his Marines on a critical constraint. The rules of engagement authorized lethal force only if the pirates initiated fire. The preferred outcome was detention without discharge. Every pirate taken alive was a potential intelligence source. A dead pirate was a dead end. I spent hours going through the available operational reporting on this, and one detail kept nagging me. The timeline between concept approval and execution was remarkably compressed. From the initial intelligence assessment in September to the vessel entering the patrol corridor on December 8th, barely 10 weeks had passed. For a joint U.S.-EU operation requiring diplomatic coordination, vessel procurement, physical modification, and fast team deployment, that pace is unusual. It suggests that someone at 5th Fleet, possibly NAVCENT Commander Vice Admiral George Wyckoff, pushed this through with unusual urgency. Why the rush? Because the intelligence cell had identified something else. The spike in attacks wasn't random. It correlated with a broader disruption in Gulf of Aden security coverage. Since October 2023, the Houthis in Yemen had been launching missile and drone attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The U.S. and coalition naval forces had been drawn north, into the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb Strait, to counter that threat. Operations Prosperity Guardian and Poseidon Archer had absorbed destroyer and cruiser assets that would normally patrol the Gulf of Aden's eastern approaches. The pirates saw the gap, and someone was helping them exploit it. The Decoy vessel entered the patrol corridor on December 8, 2025. It sailed at 10 knots, slow for a bulk carrier, but consistent with the speed of the previously targeted vessels. Its AIS transponder broadcast a commercial identification. Its deck was clear of any visible security measures. No razor wire, no water cannons, no armed guards on the bridge wings. To any observer, or any scout feeding intelligence to a pirate network, it looked like exactly what it was designed to look like: a soft target. For 5 days, nothing happened. The vessel made a slow transit eastward, then turned and retraced its route. The Marine team rotated between watch cycles and rest in the lower deck compartment. Temperatures below deck reached 38 degrees Celsius. Ventilation was limited to avoid any external noise signature. The Marines consumed MREs and rationed water. On December 11th, the vessel's camera system detected a small craft at a range of approximately 9 nautical miles. The craft maintained a parallel course for 6 hours, then disappeared. The Combat Information Team classified it as a probable scout, confirming that the vessel had been spotted and was being evaluated. On December 12th, a second sighting, this time 2 craft. They approached to within 4 nautical miles, circled the vessel's stern, and withdrew. The thermal cameras captured imagery of at least 3 individuals on each craft. No weapons were visible, but the behavior pattern matched pre-boarding reconnaissance documented in previous piracy incidents. The staff sergeant briefed his team. Contact was likely within 48 hours. Then a problem emerged that nearly derailed the entire operation. At 2140 on December 12th, the encrypted communications link to CTF-151 headquarters dropped. The satellite uplink module, a critical piece of equipment installed during the Djibouti refit, experienced a firmware fault that caused the encryption handshake to fail. For 3 hours and 20 minutes, the vessel was operationally dark. No communication with the command network. No ability to call for backup. No way to transmit intelligence in real time. The backup communication plan was a high-frequency radio link, but HF transmissions are detectable and would have compromised the vessel's cover as a commercial ship. The staff sergeant made a decision. Maintain radio silence. Continue the mission. Fix the uplink. The team's communications specialist, a corporal with electronics training, spent those 3 hours diagnosing the fault. At 1:02 on December 13th, he restored the link by bypassing the faulty module and routing through a secondary encryption protocol. It was a field expedient fix. It worked, but it reduced bandwidth, meaning video feeds could no longer be transmitted in real time to headquarters. Only voice and compressed data. That equipment failure is significant. If the pirates had boarded during those 3 hours, the Marine team would have executed the takedown without any external support coordination. No helicopter backup. No nearby warship alerted. 13 Marines against an unknown number of armed boarders completely on their own. What gets me about this operation is how thin the margin really was. Military precision gets talked about like it's guaranteed, like technology always works and backup is always there. A firmware glitch nearly turned a controlled interdiction into an isolated gunfight in hostile waters. December 13th passed without contact. The scout craft did not reappear. December 14th, 3:50 local time. The vessel's thermal cameras detected a craft approaching from the southeast at high speed. Bearing 142. Range 6 nautical miles. Closing fast. Estimated speed 22 knots. 3 minutes later, a second contact. Same bearing. Trailing the first by approximately 800 meters. The staff sergeant was awakened. He was on the bridge, concealed behind a blackout partition, within 90 seconds. The camera operator reported 2 contacts, skiff type, fast approach, direct intercept course. At 4:03, the first skiff slowed to approximately 5 knots and began paralleling the vessel's port side at a range of 300 meters. The second skiff moved to the stern. At 04:09, the stern skiff closed to within 50 meters. Thermal imagery showed 4 individuals. 2 were handling equipment, later identified as grappling hooks and a caving ladder. 2 were holding objects consistent with rifles. The staff sergeant transmitted a single coded word to CTF-151 headquarters via the restored satellite link, snare. This indicated imminent boarding and activated the response protocol, alerting the nearest coalition warship, the French frigate FS Languedoc, operating approximately 40 nautical miles to the northwest. At 4:12, the first grappling hook hit the stern rail. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface. The Marines were in position. Cameras showed 4 hostiles at the stern, 2 more on the portside skiff. 6 total, armed. The rules of engagement were clear. The team could have intercepted the boarding at the rail, stopped the pirates before they ever set foot on deck. They didn't. The operational plan required the pirates to fully board and advance toward the bridge before the takedown was initiated. The reasoning was intelligence-driven. If the pirates were stopped at the rail, they'd dump their phones and electronics overboard. The evidence would be lost. The coordinator, the brain of the network, would remain unidentified. The Marines needed the pirates inside the ship, committed, away from the rail, with their devices still on their bodies. So the team watched. In the lower deck, through the camera feeds, they watched 6 armed men climb aboard. 4:14. 2 pirates on deck. moving forward along the port side. Weapons up. 4:15, 4 pirates on deck. The remaining 2 from the stern skiff. The group consolidated near the aft superstructure. One individual appeared to be speaking into a handheld radio, likely communicating with the portside skiff or a coordinator ashore. 4:16. The group began moving toward the bridge access ladder. Single file. Weapons at the ready. 4:17. All 6 pirates were inside the superstructure. The stern rail was clear. The staff sergeant gave the order. Execute, execute, execute. The takedown was conducted from 2 directions simultaneously. 1 fire team, 4 Marines, entered the superstructure from the lower deck access through a concealed hatch that had been installed during the Djibouti refit. A second fire team moved up from the engine room compartment, sealing the aft corridor. The pirates were in a narrow passageway leading to the bridge ladder. No room to maneuver, no cover, confined space. The lead Marine in the forward fire team deployed 2 flashbang grenades in rapid succession. The detonations in the enclosed corridor were devastating, disorienting, blinding, overwhelming. The pirates never fired a shot. Within 45 seconds, all 6 were on the deck, face down, flex-cuffed. 2 had dropped their weapons immediately. 2 others attempted to turn back toward the stern but were met by the second fire team blocking the corridor. The remaining 2 froze. The staff sergeant later reported that he had expected armed resistance. He had prepared for it. His Marines had trained for close-quarters gunfights in confined shipboard spaces. The fact that the engagement ended without a single round fired was, in his words, the best possible outcome we didn't plan on. Total elapsed time from first grappling hook to final detainee secured, 3 minutes and 47 seconds. The port side skiff, carrying 2 additional individuals, attempted to flee when the flashbangs detonated. The sound was audible across the water. The skiff accelerated northeast at full throttle. It was tracked by radar and intercepted 42 minutes later by a rigid-hulled inflatable boat launched from the FS Languedoc, which had been closing at maximum speed since receiving the snare alert. 8 individuals detained total, all alive, all carrying personal effects. The intelligence harvest began immediately. Put yourself in the staff sergeant's position for a second. 4 minutes ago, you had armed men aboard your ship. Now you have 8 detainees, a pile of weapons, and a ticking clock. Because every minute that passes, the coordinator on shore might realize communication has gone silent and begin destroying evidence. The Marines' exploitation team, 2 specialists trained in tactical sensitive site exploitation, began processing the detainees' personal effects while the prisoners were still being secured. Speed was essential. What they found was more than they'd expected. 6 mobile phones. 3 of them were smartphones with active cellular connections, likely using Somali telecom networks with coverage extending offshore. 2 handheld GPS units with stored waypoints. 1 satellite phone. A Thuraya model common in the region. A notebook with handwritten entries in Somali, including what appeared to be vessel names, dates, and coordinate notations. The phones were the priority. The exploitation team extracted SIM card data and call logs on site using portable forensic equipment. Initial analysis identified a pattern. All 6 smartphones had been in recent contact with a single number. A number registered to a location in Garikad, a coastal town in the Mudug region of Puntland, approximately 400 kilometers south of Isle. Not Isle, Garikad. The intelligence cell had been looking in the wrong place. One detail that stuck with me from the reporting: the pirate who had been using the satellite phone was not the apparent leader of the boarding party. He was the youngest of the group, estimated early 20s. He carried the Thuraya in a waterproof pouch strapped to his chest, separate from his weapon. The exploitation team assessed that he was the designated communications link, the one responsible for reporting the hijacking's progress to the coordinator in real time. He had sent his last message at 4:11, 1 minute before the first grappling hook was thrown. The message read, translated from Somali. On the ship, starting now. He never sent a follow-up. The phone data was transmitted to the CTF-151 intelligence fusion cell within 2 hours of the takedown. Analysts at Combined Maritime Forces headquarters in Bahrain, working alongside signals intelligence specialists from the National Security Agency's regional facility, began mapping the communication network. The single Garacad number was the nexus. Call records showed it had been in contact with at least 14 other numbers over the preceding 4 months. Numbers associated with known pirate operatives, port workers in Bosaso and Mogadishu, and, critically, 2 numbers linked to individuals working at a regional shipping logistics company. This was the targeting mechanism. Someone inside a legitimate shipping company was providing vessel identification data, type, tonnage, speed, security posture, transit schedule, to the pirate coordinator in Garacad. The coordinator was identified within 72 hours of the takedown. His name has not been publicly released, but sources familiar with the operation described him as a mid-level logistics figure. Not a pirate himself, but a facilitator. He arranged skiff fuel, crew recruitment, weapons procurement, and ransom negotiations. He had been operating for at least 18 months without appearing in any coalition intelligence database. He was a ghost. Until December 14th. Here's the take that'll probably get us flack. The fact that this coordinator operated undetected for 18 months isn't a failure of Somali governance or a failure of coalition intelligence in isolation. It's a direct consequence of the strategic reallocation that pulled naval assets into the Red Sea to deal with the Houthi threat. Operation Prosperity Guardian saved lives and protected shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb. But it left the Gulf of Aden's eastern flank exposed, and the pirate networks, which never fully dissolved, they just went dormant, exploited that gap with precision. We spent 2 years focused on the Houthis and forgot that the original threat never went away. It just waited. The identification of the Garacad coordinator set off a cascade of follow-up operations. The first came on December 29, 2025. Acting on intelligence derived from the phone data, a Puntland Maritime Police Force unit, supported by EU Naval Force advisors, conducted a raid on a compound in Garacad. They seized communications equipment, cash in US dollars and Somali shillings, and documents detailing planned hijacking operations for early 2026. 2 individuals were detained. The second operation occurred on January 11, 2026. A dhow operating as a mothership was identified and tracked by Maritime Patrol aircraft. A P-3 Orion operating out of Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. The dhow was intercepted by the guided missile destroyer USS Stockdale, approximately 90 nautical miles east of Socotra Island. The boarding party found weapons, fuel stores, and navigation charts with marked intercept positions matching the coordinates found in the notebook seized on December 14th. The third interdiction was the most significant. On January 28, 2026, a joint operation involving Somali Federal Security Forces and international intelligence support targeted the 2 individuals linked to the shipping logistics company. The arrests were made in Bosaso, Puntland's commercial capital. According to reports, the suspects had access to the regional port authority's vessel tracking system, the exact mechanism by which pirate targeting data had been generated. 3 operations. 3 nodes of the network eliminated, all traceable to the intelligence harvested from 6 phones and a Thuraya satellite unit carried by men who thought they were boarding a defenseless cargo ship. What do you think? Was this operation a model for future counter-piracy strategy, or did it only work because the pirates didn't expect it? Would a second honeypot attempt in the same waters ever succeed, or has the element of surprise already been spent? Drop your answer in the comments. The tactical success of Operation Lariat was clear, but the operation also exposed vulnerabilities that defense planners are still working through. The first is the coverage gap. The Gulf of Aden patrol grid that suppressed piracy between 2012 and 2023 was built on a coalition model: shared burden, rotating deployments, international cooperation. When the Houthi crisis pulled U.S., U.K., and French naval assets north, that grid thinned dramatically. The pirate resurgence of late 2025 was a direct and predictable result. According to declassified assessments, CTF-151's area of responsibility spans approximately 1.1 million square nautical miles. In December 2025, the task force had 3 warships assigned to that entire area, 3 ships for a region larger than the Mediterranean Sea. The math doesn't work. It never worked. It was always a bet that pirate activity would remain low enough that 3 ships could respond to incidents rather than prevent them. In 2025, that bet was called. The second vulnerability is institutional. The intelligence fusion cell that identified the targeting pattern did so in September. The operation wasn't executed until December. In those 3 months, at least 4 additional vessels were attacked. 2 were successfully boarded and their crews held for ransom. Ransoms that funded the very network Operation Lariat was designed to dismantle. The court transcripts and operational filings run into hundreds of pages, but it's a single detail in the post-operation review that tells the real story. The fusion cell's September assessment was initially classified at a level that prevented it from being shared with EU naval force counterparts for 11 days. 11 days of bureaucratic delay while ships were being hijacked. The third issue is legal. The 8 detainees from the December 14th operation were transferred to regional custody for prosecution. Under international maritime law, piracy is a universal jurisdiction offense. Any nation can prosecute. In practice, few nations are willing to accept the legal burden. Kenya, which had previously agreed to prosecute Gulf of Aden piracy cases, suspended its cooperation agreement in 2023. The Seychelles' capacity is limited. The result is a legal gray zone, where captured pirates can spend weeks or months in military custody before a prosecuting jurisdiction is identified. As of the latest available reporting, 5 of the 8 detainees had been transferred to Puntland for prosecution. The status of the remaining 3, including the young communications operative with the Thuraya, remains unclear. We dug through 5 years of CTF-151 operational summaries to contextualize what happened in December 2025. And here's what didn't make the news. Operation Lariat wasn't the first honeypot concept proposed for the Gulf of Aden. A similar plan was drafted in 2019 and again in 2021. Both times it was rejected. Once over legal concerns about entrapment under maritime law, once because the risk assessment concluded that a firefight aboard a decoy vessel could produce casualties that would be politically untenable. What changed in 2025 wasn't the concept. It was the desperation. The pirate resurgence was threatening to undermine freedom of navigation in one of the world's most critical shipping corridors, a corridor that carries 12% of global trade. The risk calculus shifted. Doing nothing became more dangerous than setting the trap. The Marines who executed the takedown returned to Djibouti on December 16th. They were debriefed over a 4-day period. The staff sergeant submitted an after-action report that, according to sources who have reviewed it, ran 31 pages. His primary recommendation: establish a permanent fast rotation for counter-piracy decoy operations, with pre-positioned vessels and standing rules of engagement that don't require case-by-case approval from NAVCENT. That recommendation, as of early 2026, has not been adopted. The reason cited in planning discussions is resources. A permanent decoy program would require dedicated vessels, standing marine teams, and sustained intelligence support, assets that are currently committed elsewhere. The counter-piracy mission is, once again, competing with everything else. The broader implications extend beyond the Gulf of Aden. In February 2026, the European Union announced a review of Operation Atalanta's mandate and force composition, citing the piracy resurgence as evidence that the mission had been prematurely scaled back. NATO's Allied Maritime Command issued a strategic assessment noting that the Gulf of Aden piracy corridor and the Red Sea Houthi threat corridor now overlapped in ways that complicated force allocation. And in the corridors of the Pentagon, a debate is underway that has no easy answer. How does a navy that's simultaneously deterring China in the Pacific, countering Iran in the Persian Gulf, protecting shipping from Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, and supporting Ukraine-related operations in the Atlantic, also suppress piracy off the Horn of Africa? The answer, based on what happened in December 2025, appears to be, it can't. Not with current force structure, not with current levels of international cooperation, not without something giving way. Will the honeypot model become a standard tool in the counter-piracy arsenal? Or will the pirates adapt and make it obsolete within a year? Comment yes or no. We read every response. One more thing worth noting. The pirate coordinator identified through Operation Lariat had connections beyond simple hijacking for ransom. Intelligence recovered from the Garakad raid suggested links to arms smuggling routes along the Somali coast, routes that intersect with networks supplying weapons to conflict zones in Yemen and Ethiopia. Counter-piracy was never only about piracy. These are ungoverned coastlines where state authority barely functions and criminal networks fill the gap. Shut down a pirate cell, and you might also disrupt a weapons pipeline. Ignore it, and the weapons keep flowing. That's the lesson of December 14th, 2025. 6 men climbed over a stern rail expecting a payday. They walked into a trap that unraveled a network reaching across 3 countries and multiple criminal enterprises. 3 minutes and 47 seconds of tactical action. 6 weeks of follow-up operations. An intelligence thread that is still being pulled. The Gulf of Aden is not secure. The pirate networks are damaged but not destroyed. The coverage gap remains. The legal framework for prosecution is still inadequate, and the strategic competition for naval assets across the Pacific, Persian Gulf, Red Sea, and Horn of Africa is only intensifying. One operation changed the equation for 6 weeks. It didn't solve the problem. The next attack was already being planned before the Marines got back to Djibouti. Subscribe if you want to see how the Navy deals with what comes next.